In the year 1799, Captain Amaso Delano of Duxbury in Massachusetts, commanding a large sealer and general trader, lay at anchor with a valuable cargo in the harbor of St. Maria, a small, desert, uninhabited island toward the southern extremity of the long coast of Chile. There he had touched for water. On the second day, not long after dawn, while lying in his berth, his mate came below, informing him that a strange sail was coming into the bay. Ships were then not so plenty in those waters as now. He rose, dressed, and went on deck. The morning was one peculiar to that coast. Everything was mute and calm, everything grey. The sea, though undulated into long roods of swells, seemed fixed, and was sleeked at the surface like waved lead that is cooled and set in the smelter's mould. Flights of troubled grey fowl, kith and kin with flights of troubled grey vapours among which they were mixed, skimmed low and fitfully over the waters, as swallows over meadows before storms. Shadows present, foreshadowing deeper shadows to come.
She shows no colors.
Considering the lawlessness and loneliness of the spot, and the sort of stories that day associated with those seas, Captain Delano's surprise might have deepened into some uneasiness, had he not been a person of a singularly undistrustful good nature, not liable except on extraordinary and repeated incentives, and hardly then to indulge in personal alarms any way involving the imputation of malign evil in man.
No, sir, no colors, and she's drawing too near the land.
That proves her a stranger to these waters and the island. What singular maneuvers. It seems hard to decide whether she means to come in or no. Look at that.
It might be in distress, sir. But it could be a ruse.
No, I'd better go to her. Have the whaleboat dropped and prepare to board her. Put several baskets of fish into the boat.
Aye, Captain. Lower whaleboat. Move smartly there. Move it, there she goes.
With Captain Delano aboard, the whaleboat pulled away. Upon gaining a less remote view, the ship appeared like a whitewashed monastery after a thunderstorm, seen perched upon some dun cliff among the Pyrenees. But it was no purely fanciful resemblance, which now, for a moment, almost led Captain Delano to think that nothing less than a shipload of monks was before him. Peering over the bulwarks were what really seemed, in the hazy distance, throngs of dark cowls, while other dark moving figures were dimly descried as of black friars pacing the cloisters.
Ah, it's a Spanish merchantman of the first class carrying Negro slaves. She appears to have been launched from Ezekiel's Valley of Dry Bones.
There are no guns visible, sir.
I'm sure they couldn't fire guns if they had them. Why, the whole ship is battered and moldy and full of decay. Have you ever seen anything so neglected?
You could use the scraper, tar, and brush, sir.
She has a shield-like sternpiece carved with the arms of Castile and Leon and surrounded by symbolical devices. Look, there's a dark satyr in a mask holding his foot on the prostrate neck of a writhing figure, likewise masked.
The figurehead's wrapped in canvas. There's her name, the San Dominic.
Yes, and what's that painted below the canvas? Seguid Vestro Jefe. Follow your leader. Huh.
At last the whaleboat was hooked from the bow along toward the gangway amidship, and Captain Delano climbed aboard. He was at once surrounded by a clamorous throng of whites and blacks, but the latter outnumbering the former more than could have been expected. The scurvy, together with the fever, had swept off a great part of their number, more especially the Spaniards. During the outpouring of this common tale of suffering, the Spanish captain, a gentlemanly, reserved-looking and rather young man, stood passively by, leaning against the mainmast, at one moment casting a dreary, spiritless look upon his excited people, at the next, an unhappy glance toward his visitor. By his side stood a black of small stature, in whose rude face as occasionally he mutely turned it up into the captain's, sorrow and affection were equally blended.
Bring up the basket of fish. Jack, return to our ship and fetch back as much water as the whaleboat can carry, along with whatever soft bread the steward might have. Bring all of the remaining pumpkins on board, with a box of sugar and a dozen of my bottles of cider.
Aye, sir. Are you staying aboard, Captain?
I'll help there, Captain, bring her safely into the harbor and render whatever assistance I can.
Yes, sir.
Left alone on board with them, Captain Delano sought to cheer up the strangers. Both the Spaniards and blacks were evidently reduced from scarcity of water and provisions. This long-continued suffering seemed to have brought out the less good-natured qualities of the Negroes, besides at the same time impairing the Spaniards' authority over them. In armies, navies, cities, or families, in nature herself, nothing more relaxes good order than misery. Still, Captain Delano believed that had Benito Cereno, which was the Spanish captain's name, been a man of greater energy, misrule would hardly have come to the present pass. To have beheld this undemonstrative invalid gliding about, apathetic and mute, no landsman could have dreamed that in him was lodged a dictatorship, beyond which, while at sea, there was no earthly appeal.
Don Benito, if I but knew the full particulars of your ship's misfortunes, perhaps I could be better able to relieve them.
It is now 190 days that this ship, well officered and well manned with several cabin passengers, some 50 Spaniards in all, sailed from Buenos Aires bound to Lima with a general cargo, hardware, Paraguay tea and the like, and that parcel of Negroes, now not more than 150 as you can see, but then numbering over 300 souls. Off Cape Horn we had heavy gales. In one moment by night, 3 of my best officers with 15 sailors were lost, with the mainyard, the spars snapping under them in the slings as they sought with heavers to beat down the icy sails. When... oh, my God! Rather than pass through what I have with joy, I would have hailed the most terrible gales, but...
His mind wanders. He was thinking of the plague that followed the gales. My poor master. But be patient, senor. These fits do not last long. Master will soon be himself.
After the storms, scurvy broke out, carrying off numbers of whites and blacks. We were blown northwestward, where the breeze deserted us in unknown waters. With the scanty allowance of water, a malignant fever followed the scurvy.
And the fever took all of the officers except poor master.
But throughout these calamities, I have to thank those Negroes you see who, though to your inexperienced eyes appearing unruly, have indeed conducted themselves with less of restlessness than even their owner could have thought possible under such circumstances. Yes, their owner was quite right in assuring me that no fetters would be needed with these blacks. They have always remained upon deck and from the beginning been freely permitted to range within given bounds at their pleasure. And it is Babu here to whom, under God, I owe not only my own preservation, but likewise to him chiefly the merit is due of pacifying his more ignorant brethren when at intervals tempted to murmurings.
Master, don't speak of me. Babu is nothing. What Babu has done was but duty.
Faithful fellow. Don Benito, I envy you such a friend. Slave, I cannot call him. Well, we'll have a good supply of water here, as well as some sails and rigging, and you'll be ship-shape in no time.
This excitement is bad for master.
All through this conversation, a group of 6 black Ashantis, who sat cross-legged, each with a rusty hatchet in his hand, clashed their hatchets together like cymbals, with a barbarous din. They were evidently engaged in scouring the rusty hatchets. But since the hatchets had anything but an attractive look, and the handlers of them still less so, it was not without some reluctance or even shrinking that Captain Delano passed among them. Presently, while standing with his host looking forward upon the decks below, he was struck by one of these instances of insubordination. One of the black boys, enraged at a word dropped by one of his white companions, seized a knife and struck the lad over the head, inflicting a gash from which blood flowed.
Why, look at that, Don Benito.
He's just the sport of the land.
Pretty serious sport, truly. And such a thing happened on board the Bachelor's Delight, instant punishment would have followed.
Doubtless, senor.
I should think, Don Benito, that you would find it advantageous to keep all your blacks employed, especially the younger ones. Why, even with my little band, I find such a course indispensable. I once kept a crew on my quarterdeck thrumming mats for my cabin when for 3 days I'd given up my ship, mats, men, and all, for a speedy loss owing to the violence of a gale in which we could do nothing but helplessly drive before it.
Doubtless.
But I see you keep some, at least, of your host employed. Those hatchet polishers there.
Yes.
And those 4 elderly, grizzled Negroes growling and droning away like so many gray-headed bagpipers playing a funeral march while they pick oakum. Have you appointed them shepherds to your flock of black sheep?
What posts they feel I appointed them?
Now, these Ashanti conjurers here polishing hatchets. This seems a curious business they are at, Don Benito.
In the gales we met, what of our general cargo was not thrown overboard was much damaged by the brine. Since coming into calm weather, I have had several cases of knives and hatchets daily brought up for overhauling and cleaning.
Prudent idea, Don Benito. You are part owner of the ship and cargo, I presume, but none of the slaves, perhaps.
I am owner of all you see, except the main company of blacks who belong to my late friend, Alexandro Aranda.
And may I ask, Don Benito, whether, since a while ago you spoke of some cabin passengers, the friend whose loss so afflicts you at the outset of the voyage accompanied his blacks?
Yes.
But died of the fever?
Died of fever? Oh, could I but...
Oh, pardon me. But it was once my hard fortune to lose, at sea, a dear friend, my own brother. I could have borne his departure like a man, but that honest eye, that honest hand, and that warm heart, all, like scraps to the dogs, to throw all to the sharks. It was then I vowed never to have for a fellow voyager a man I loved, unless, unbeknown to him, I had provided every requisite in case of a fatality for embalming his mortal parts for interment on shore. Were your friend's remains now on board this ship, Don Benito, the mention of his name would not affect you so strangely.
On board this ship?
With horrified gestures as directed against some spectre, Don Benito fell into the ready arms of his attendant. At this moment, with a dreary graveyard toll betokening a flaw, the ship's forecastle bell, smote by one of the grizzled oakum pickers, proclaimed 10 o'clock through the leaden calm. Captain Delano's attention was caught by the moving figure of a gigantic black emerging from the general crowd below and slowly advancing towards the elevated poop. An iron collar was about his neck, from which depended a chain thrice wound round his body, the terminating links padlocked together at a broad band of iron, his girdle.
How like a mute, a two-fold moves.
What's this? Some mulish mutineer brought up to receive sentence?
See, he waits your question, master.
Atufal, will you ask my pardon now?
Again, master. Again. He will bend to master yet.
Answer. Say but the one word, pardon, and your chains shall be off. Go.
Excuse me, Don Benito, but this scene surprises me. What means it, pray?
It means that this Negro alone of all the band has given me peculiar cause of offense. I have put him in chains. I could not scourge such a form, but I told him he must ask my pardon. As yet he has not. At my command, every 2 hours he stands before me.
And how long has this been?
Some 60 days.
And obedient in all else? And respectful?
Yes.
Upon my conscience, then, he has a royal spirit in him, this fellow.
He may have some right to it. He says he was king in his own land.
Yes. Those slits in our twofold's ear once held wedges of gold. But poor Babu here, in his own land, was only a poor slave. A black man's slave was Babu, who is now the whites.
What, pray, was that Tufal's offense, Don Benito? Take a fool's advice, and in view of his general docility, as well as in some natural respect for his spirit, remit him his penalty.
No, master never will do that. Proud of twofold must first ask master's pardon. The slave there carries the padlock, but master here carries the key.
So, Don Benito, padlock and key, significant symbols, truly.
Presently the Spaniard, assisted by his servant, moved apart from his guest. Then the two began whispering together in low voices. Something very unpleasing and discourteous in the eyes of the American captain. At last, his pale face twitching and overcast, the Spaniard, still supported by his attendant, moved over towards his guest.
Senor, may I ask how long you have lain at his isle?
Oh, but a day or two, Don Benito.
And from what port are you last?
Canton.
And there, senor, you exchanged your sealskins for teas and silks, I think you said?
Yes.
And
Silks, mostly.
And the balance you took in coin, perhaps?
Yes, some silver. Not a very great deal, though.
Well, may I ask, how many men have you, senor?
About 25, all told.
And the present, senor, all on board, I suppose?
All on board, Don Benito.
And will be tonight, senor? And will be tonight, senor?
Yes, for aught I know. But no, some of them talked of going off on another fishing party about midnight.
Your ships generally go more or less armed, I believe, senor.
Oh, a 6-pounder or two in case of emergency, with a small stock of muskets, sealing spears, and cutlasses, you know.
Again, Don Benito and his attendant withdrew to the opposite bulwarks, where the whispering was resumed. Just then, Captain Delano saw one of the Spanish sailors descending from the rigging. Beneath his loose shirt of coarse woolen, much spotted with tar, Captain Delano could see a soiled undergarment of what seemed the finest linen, edged with a narrow blue ribbon, sadly faded and worn. At this moment, the young sailor's eye was again fixed on the whisperers, and Captain Delano thought he observed a lurking significance in it, as if silent signs had that instant been interchanged. He cast another swift side look at the two. They had the air of conspirators. Plucking up a gay and humorous expression, he crossed over to the two again.
Well, Don Benito, your black here seems high in your trust. A sort of privy councillor, in fact.
Yes, senor, I have trust in Babu.
Finding that the Spaniard now stood silent and reserved, Captain Delano moved off, again and again turning over in his mind the mysterious demeanor of Benito Cereno. He had descended from the poop and, wrapped in thought, was passing near a dark hatchway leading down into the steerage, when, perceiving motion there, he looked to see what moved. The same instant there was a sparkle in the shadowy hatchway, and he saw one of the Spanish sailors prowling there, hurriedly placing his hand in the bosom of his frock as if hiding something.
Ah, what's that sparkle? It was no lamp, no match, no live coal. Could it have been a jewel? But how come sailors with jewels? Or with silk-trimmed undershirts, either? Has he been robbing the trunks of the dead cabin passengers? But if so, he would hardly wear one of the stolen articles on board ship here. Ah, if now. That was indeed a secret sign I saw passing between this suspicious fellow and his captain a while since. If I could only be certain that my senses did not deceive me. Now, what do all these phantoms amount to? It's absurd to think of a vessel in distress, a vessel by sickness almost dismanned of her crew, a vessel whose inmates were parched for water, should be of a piratical character. But then, might not the general distress, and thirst in particular, be affected, faked? And might not that same undiminished Spanish crew, alleged to have perished off to a remnant, be at this very moment lurking in the hold? Upon gaining the vicinity of my own vessel, might not the San Dominique, like a slumbering volcano, suddenly let loose energies now hid? And those questions asked by Don Benito, they were put with much the same object with which the burglar or the assassin by daytime reconnoiters the walls of a house. But why solicit such information openly of the chief person endangered, and so, in effect, set him on his guard? How unlikely a procedure was that? Oh, it's absurd to suppose these questions have been prompted by evil designs.
Just then the whaleboat appeared in the distance. The shouts attracted the attention of Don Benito, who, with a return of courtesy, approached Captain Delano. As he did so, there was a commotion on the deck below. Two of the blacks, anxiously watching the coming boat, violently pushed one of the sailors aside, then dashed into the deck, despite the earnest cries of the oakum pickers.
Don Benito, do you see what is going on there? Look! The poor fellow's too ill to look after affairs on board. Ah, but what a faithful servant. Tell me, Don Benito, I should like to have your man here myself. What will you take for him? Would 50 doubloons be any object?
Master wouldn't part with Babu for 1,000 doubloons.
That's true. Not even 1,000.
Babu must take Master below. Master is very ill.
Left to himself, Captain Delano resolved to talk with one of the sailors. So he clambered his way into the starboard quarter gallery. As he stepped among the ancient and rusty chains, he thought something moved. Groves of rigging were about the chains, and there, peering from behind a great stay, like an Indian from behind a hemlock, a Spanish sailor, a marlin spike in his hand, was seen, who made what seemed an imperfect gesture towards the balcony, but immediately, as if alarmed by some advancing step along the deck within, vanished into the recesses of the hempen forest like a poacher.
What's this? Was he seeking to communicate something to me? Something unbeknown to anyone, even to his captain? Some secret unfavorable to his captain? Oh, it was probably some random, unintentional motion of the man which I mistook for a significant beckoning. Perhaps Don Benito, in withdrawing below, is there maturing his plot. This sailor, by some means gaining an inkling, has it in mind to warn me. But if the whites had dark secrets concerning Don Benito, could then Don Benito be anyway in complicity with the blacks? No, that's impossible.
Lost in these mazes of thought, Captain Delano returned to the deck and advanced uneasily along it. There he observed a new face, an aged sailor, seated cross-legged near the main hatchway. His skin was shrunk up with wrinkles like a pelican's empty pouch, his hair frosted, his countenance grave and composed. His hands were full of ropes, which he was working into a large knot. He looked like an Egyptian priest making Gordian knots for the temple of Ammon.
What are you knotting there, my man?
The knot.
So it seems. But what is it for?
For someone else to undo.
Well, that seems...
Here, undo it. Cut it, quick.
Oh.
The old man threw the knot towards him. For a moment, knot in hand and knot in head, Captain Delano stood mute, while, without further heeding him, the old man was now intent upon other ropes. Presently there was a slight stir behind Captain Delano. Turning, he saw the chained Negro, Atufal, standing quietly there. The next moment the old sailor rose, muttering, and followed by his subordinate Negroes, removed to the forward part of the ship. An elderly Negro approached the captain and explained that the old knotter was simple-witted but harmless, often playing his odd tricks. He concluded by begging the knot, which, when Captain Delano gave it to him, he tossed overboard.
This is very queer. Very queer. Ah, there's the whale boat.
Master is better now. He presents his compliments to his good guest, Don Amasa, and asks him to rejoin Master.
There now, what a donkey I was. This kind gentleman who here sends me his kind compliments, he but 10 minutes ago, dark lantern in hand, was dodging round some old grindstone in the hold, sharpening a hatchet for me. Well, these long calms have a morbid effect on the mind. Ah, this fear is like the ague. Because it went off, it follows not that it won't come back. What are the peculiarities of the captain and crew? First, the affair of the Spanish lad assailed with a knife by the slave boy. It was winked at by Don Benito. Second, the tyranny in Don Benito's treatment of Atufal. Third, the trampling of the sailor by the two Negroes, a piece of insolence passed over without so much as a reprimand. And finally, the strange behavior of Don Benito himself, not to mention the other Spanish sailors. Very strange.
As he pondered the strange events aboard the San Dominic, the whaleboat gradually made its way to the becalmed vessel and finally touched its side. Don Benito, with his servant, now appeared, his coming, perhaps, hastened by hearing the noise. The casks and other provisions being on deck, Captain Delano dispatched the whaleboat back to the sealer, with orders for all the hands that could be spared immediately to set about rafting casks to the watering place and filling them. Since there was a full moon that night, he would remain on board ready to play the pilot, come the wind soon or late.
Had you 3 or 4 boats now, Don Benito, I think that by tugging at the oars, your Negroes here might help along matters some. Did you sail from port without boats, Don Benito?
They were stove in the gale, senor.
That was bad. Many men, too, you lost then. Boats and men. Those must have been hard gales, Don Benito.
Past all speech.
Tell me, Don Benito, tell me, were these gales immediately off the pitch of Cape Horn?
Cape Horn. Who spoke of Cape Horn?
Yourself did, when giving me an account of your voyage. You yourself, Don Benito, spoke of Cape Horn.
Master told me never mind where he was or how engaged, always to remind him to a minute when shaving time comes. Mangale has gone to strike the half-hour afternoon. It is now, Master. Will Master go into the cuddy?
Ah, yes.
Then, if Master means to talk more to Donna Massa, why not let Donna Massa sit by Master in the cabin, and Master can talk, and Donna Massa can listen, while Babu here lathers and strops.
Yes, Don Benito. Unless you had rather not, I will go with you.
Be it so, senor.
As the three passed aft, the American could not but think it another strange instance of his host's capriciousness, this being shaved with such uncommon punctuality in the middle of the day. The place called the cuddy was a light deck cabin formed by the poop, a sort of attic to the large cabin below. Part of it had formerly been the quarters of the officers, but since their death all the partitionings had been thrown down and the whole interior converted into one spacious and airy marine hall. Everything was in disarray, cluttered with odd bits of furniture and possessions stashed here and there. There were two long, sharp-ribbed settees of Malacca cane, black with age, and uncomfortable to look at as an inquisitor's rack, with a large, misshapen armchair which, furnished with a rude barber's support at the back, working with a screw, seemed some grotesque engine of torment. A flag locker was in one corner open, exposing various colored flags, some rolled up, others half unrolled, still others tumbled. A torn hammock swung near, the sheets tossed, and the pillow wrinkled up like a brow, as if whoever slept here slept but poorly, with alternate visitations of sad thoughts and bad dreams.
You sleep here, Don Benito?
Yes, senor, since we got into mild weather.
This seems a sort of dormitory, sitting room, sail loft, chapel, armory, and private closet altogether, Don Benito.
Yes, senor. Events have not been favorable to much order in my arrangements.
Babu is ready to shave, Master, if Master is ready.
Ah, there is something in the Negro which in a peculiar way fits him for such tasks. He is so congenial, so good-humored. It's as if God had set the whole Negro to some pleasant tune. And he is so docile, which comes no doubt from the contentment of a limited mind, which is all the better for the blind attachments to their masters.
Hold very still, Master.
Still, with the black holding that blade at Don Benito's throat, it does remind me of a headsman with a man at the block. How odd that the black should use one of the flags from the locker as an apron. I suppose it is the African's love of bright colors and fine shows. What's this? The castle and the lion. Why, Don Benito, this is the flag of Spain you use here as your apron. It's only I and not the king that sees this, eh? It's all one, I suppose, so the colors be gay.
Now, Master, you must not shake so. See, Donna Massa. Master always shakes when I shave him. And yet Master knows I never yet have drawn blood. Though it's true if Master will shake so, I may some of these times. And now, Donna Massa, please go on with your talk about the gales and all that. Master can hear, and between times, Master can answer.
Ah, yes, these gales. But the more I think of your voyage, Don Benito, the more I wonder, not at the gales, terrible as they must have been, but at the disastrous interval following them. For here, by your account, have you been these 2 months and more getting from Cape Horn to St. Maria, a distance which I myself, with a good wind, have sailed in a few days. Oh, true, you had calms and long ones, But to be becalmed for 2 months, that is at least unusual.
Oh, see, master, you shook so here is Babu's first blood.
Poor fellow. He's so nervous he can't even bear the sight of his own blood. Is it credible that I should have imagined that this unstrung, sick man meant to spill all my blood who can't endure the sight of one little drop of his own? Surely, Amasa Delano, you have been beside yourself this day. Well, he looks like a murderer, doesn't he? More like as if himself were to be done for.
But answer, Don Amasa. Please, master. While I wipe this ugly stuff off the razor and strop it again.
Again, Don Benito rehearsed to Captain Delano the calms of unusual duration, the obstinate currents, and the events of the past 2 months, mingling with his words incidental praises to the blacks for their general conduct. When all was finished, seeing that Don Benito remained seated in gloomy silence, Captain Delano returned to the deck, where he stood a while thinking over the scene he had just witnessed. Suddenly he heard a noise from the cuddy, and turning, saw Babu, his cheek bleeding, running from the cabin.
When will master get better from his sickness? The sickness made him serve Babu so. Cutting Babu with razor because only by accident Babu had given master one little scratch. And for the first time in so many days, too. Oh,
this slavery breeds ugly passions in man. Poor fellow.
He was about to speak in sympathy to the Negro, but he reluctantly re-entered the cuddy. Presently, master and man came forth, Don Benito leaning on his servant as if nothing had happened.
Don Benito, look! The wind! There, I told you so. Why, the poor fellow seems to have even less welcome for the breeze than the calm. Oh, I suppose his bitter experience has taught him that one ripple does not make a wind any more than one swallow a summer.
As Captain Delano gave directions and commands, he heard a voice faithfully repeating his orders. Turning, he saw Babu, now for the time acting his original part of captain of the slaves.
Good fellows, these Negroes. A little training would make fine sailors of them. There will soon be an end to your cares, at least for a while. For when, after a long, sad voyage, you know the anchor drops into the haven, all its vast weight seems lifted from the captain's heart. Ah, how this wind braces one up. My ship is now in sight, Don Benito. Come, you must take a cup of coffee with me this evening. My old steward will give you as fine a cup as ever any sultan tasted. What say you, Don Benito? Will you? Oh, you don't answer. Come. All day you've been my host. Would you have hospitality all on one side?
I cannot go.
What? It will not fatigue you. The ships will lie together as near as they can without swinging foul. It will be little more than stepping from deck to deck, which is but as from room to room. Come, you must not refuse me.
I cannot go.
Keep your oars, man.
Careful there. Careful.
In a very short time, the two vessels lay anchored together in neighborly style. Before returning to his own vessel, Captain Delano descended to the cabin to take his leave of Don Benito. The Spanish captain, supported by his servant, rose to his feet and, grasping Captain Delano's hand, stood tremulous, too much agitated to speak. Captain Delano bowed and withdrew.
How is it that Don Benito is so proper, so formal at times, but now is heedless of the common propriety in not accompanying his departing guest? Is it his indisposition? That certainly had not forbidden more irksome exertions earlier today. And why did he decline my invitation to visit the Bachelor's Delight this evening? And what of these enigmas and contradictions throughout the day? Are they intended to mystify preliminary to some stealthy blow, some act of piracy? Atufal, the pretended rebel but punctual shadow, is he now lying in wait?
The next moment, with clenched jaw and hand, Captain Delano passed Atufal and emerged unharmed in the light. There was his trim ship lying peacefully almost within call. The oakum pickers were still gravely plying their fingers, and there were the hatchet polishers, still bestirring themselves over their endless occupation. Once again he smiled at the phantoms that had mocked him. He was just about to descend the ladder to his whaleboat when he heard his name.
Captain Delano!
Ah, Don Benito! I have done him wrong. His apparent coldness has deceived me. In no instance has he meant to offend. Why, the poor fellow is too overcome by gratitude to speak.
Don Benito silently took the captain's hand and would not let go, though the servants seemed anxious to terminate this farewell.
I can go no further. Here I must bid you adieu. Adieu, my dear friend, dear Don Amasa. Go, and God guard you better than me, my best friend.
Captain Delano at last descended into his boat and ordered the boat shoved off. Don Benito stood rooted in the gangway. As soon as the boat was pushed a short distance from the ship, Don Benito sprang over the bulwarks, falling in the boat at the feet of Captain Delano. At the shout from Don Benito, sailors from different parts of the ship splashed into the sea, swimming after their captain, as if intent upon his rescue.
What is this, sir?
Row for your lives! This plotting pirate means murder!
Just then, Babu, as if with desperate fidelity to befriend his master to the last, flung himself into the boat, dagger in hand. The weapon was wrenched away before he could reach Captain Delano, his apparent victim, and he was dashed down into the bottom of the boat. Captain Delano clutched the half-reclined Don Benito, while his right foot ground the prostrate Negro.
Watch the black, Captain!
Glancing down at his feet, Captain Delano saw the free hand of the servant aiming a second dagger, a small one. With this, he was snakishly writhing up from the boat's bottom, intent on stabbing not Captain Delano, but his master. That moment, across the long-benighted mind of Captain Delano, a flash of revelation swept, illuminating his host's whole mysterious demeanor, with every enigmatic event of the day, as well as the entire past voyage of the San Dominique. He smote Babu's hand down, but his own heart smote him harder. Glancing up towards the San Dominique, Captain Delano, now with scales dropped from his eyes, saw the Negroes, not in misrule, not in tumult, not as if frantically concerned for Don Benito, but with mask torn away, flourishing hatchets and knives in ferocious piratical revolt. Like delirious black dervishes, the 6 Ashanti hatchet polishers danced on the deck. Prevented by their foes from springing into the water, like some of the other sailors, the other Spaniards were hurrying up to the topmost spars. Just then the wind whipped away the canvas shroud about the beak of the ship, suddenly revealing death for the figurehead, in a human skeleton, chalky comment on the chalked words below. Follow your leader.
He, Aranda, my murdered, unburied friend.
Babu was tied and kept imprisoned aboard the Bachelor's Delight. Learning that the mutineers had no firearms, Captain Delano dispatched the boat under the command of his chief officer, and after a fierce struggle with the Negroes, the ship was retaken. Nearly a score of the Negroes, including Atufal, were killed in the attack, and many others were wounded. On the other side, none was killed, though several were wounded, some severely, including the mate. Suffice it that, after 2 days spent in refitting, the ships sailed in company for Concepcion in Chile, and thence for Lima in Peru, where, before the viceregal courts, the whole affair from the beginning underwent investigation. In his deposition, Benito Cereno explained that on the 7th day after leaving the port of Valparaiso, at 3 o'clock in the morning, the Negroes revolted suddenly. Most of the sailors were killed, while others were thrown overboard alive. The Negro Babu, being the ringleader, and Atufal, his assistant, took over command of the ship and ordered Don Benito to carry them to Senegal. Don Benito answered that this was impossible on account of the great distance, the necessity involved of rounding Cape Horn, the bad condition of the vessel, the want of provisions, sails, and especially water. The ship was eventually brought to the island of Santa Maria, where they found the American ship, the Bachelor's Delight, already anchored. The Negroes became uneasy, but the Negro Babu pacified them and planned with Atufal to disguise the truth, devising many expedients, in some of them uniting deceit and defense. The 6 Ashantis were thus stationed on the deck as if to clean certain hatchets, but in reality to use them and distribute them at need. Among other devices was the deceit of presenting Atufal, Babu's right-hand man, as chained, though in a moment the chains could be dropped. Babu also appointed 4 aged Negroes, the oakum pickers, to keep what domestic order they could on the decks. All of the Spaniards, and Don Benito in particular, were warned that if they varied in the least from the story that Babu devised concerning their misfortunes, or uttered any word, or gave any look that should give the least intimation of the past events or present state, they should be instantly killed. Before, to keep the seamen in subjection, Babu had ordered the murder of Don Alexandro Aranda, the owner of the ship and slaves, as a warning that they must obey Babu in all things. On the 4th day following the murder, the Negro Babu showed Don Benito a skeleton, which had been substituted for the ship's proper figurehead, which was an image of Christopher Columbus, the discoverer of the New World, and told him to keep faith with the blacks until they reached Senegal, or Don Benito should, in spirit as now in body, follow your leader. This same motto, follow your leader, was written below the skeleton of Aranda as a further warning to the seamen. Captain Amasa Delano coming aboard, he was made to believe that Don Benito was the free captain of the ship, without the Spaniard having it in his power to tell a single word or give him the least hint that he might know the truth and state of things. The Negro Babu, performing the office of an officious servant, did not leave Don Benito for one moment. The Negro Babu forced Don Benito to inquire the full particulars about Captain Delano's ship and crew and arms, with the new design of becoming the captain of 2 ships instead of 1. And for fear that this design would come to pass, he risked all by leaping into the boat of the American. During the long voyage to Lima, the 2 captains had many cordial conversations. Again and again it was repeated how hard it had been to enact the part forced on the Spaniard by Babu.
Ah, my dear friend, at those very times when you thought me so morose and ungrateful, when, as you now admit, you half thought me plotting your murder, at those very times my heart was frozen. I could not look at you, thinking of what hung over my kind benefactor. And as God lives, Don Amaso, I know not whether desire for my own safety alone could have nerved me to make that leap into your boat, had it not been for the thought that if you returned to your ship unenlightened, you, with all who might be with you, would never in this world have wakened the game.
You have saved my life, Don Benito, more than I yours. Saved it, too, against my knowledge and will.
No, my friend. God charmed your life, but you saved mine. To think of some things you did, those smilings and chattings, rash pointings and gesturing, for less than these they slew my mate.
Yes, all is owing to Providence, I know. The temper of my mind that morning was more than commonly pleasant. Had it been otherwise, some of my interferences might have ended unhappily enough. Besides, those feelings I spoke of enabled me to get the better of momentary distrust at times when acuteness might have cost me my life without saving another's. Only at the end did my suspicions get the better of me, and you know how wide of the mark they then proved.
Wide indeed. You were with me all day, stood with me, sat with me, talked with me, looked at me. And yet, your last act in the boat was to clutch for a monster, not only an innocent man, but the most pitiable of all men. But you were forced to err in judgment, and you were in time undeceived. Would it was so ever and with all men.
But past is past. Why moralize upon it? Forget it. See, yon bright sun has forgotten it all, and the blue sea and the blue sky. These have turned over new leaves.
Because they have no memory. Because they are not human.
But these mild trade winds that now fan your cheek, do they not come with a human-like healing to you? Warm friends, steadfast friends of the trades.
With their steadfastness, they but waft me to my tomb, senor.
You are saved, Don Benito. What has cast such a shadow upon you?
The Negro.
There was silence while the moody man sat, slowly and unconsciously gathering his mantle about him, as if it were a pall. Some months after the investigation, Babu was dragged to the gibbet at the tail of a mule, where he met his voiceless end. The body was burned to ashes, but for many days the head, that hive of subtlety, fixed on a pole in the plaza, met unabashed the gazes of the whites, and across the plaza looked towards St. Bartholomew's Church, in whose vaults slept then as now the recovered bones of Aranda. And across the Rimac Bridge, it looked towards the monastery on Mount Agonia, where 3 months after being dismissed by the court, Benito Cereno, born on the bier, did indeed follow his leader.